wildlings, and welcome back to another installment in our Hedge Witch diary series. So today I wanted to talk to you about my first journey to meet with the plant spirit Belladonna. If you watched the last video that I uploaded, which was the first episode in the Hedge Witch school series, you will know that Belladonna is the plant spirit that I am working with intensively in the month of January, and so I wanted to relay to you my first experience with her. The Hedge Witch diary series on here is basically a compilation where I share my experiences with the spirits that I've communicated with, so you can take inspiration for your own practice and potentially explore those spirit relationships as well. The first thing that I noticed when I began journeying with Belladonna was how long it actually took to get there. Sometimes when I journey with plant spirits, you get to where they are very quickly, but with Belladonna it was a lot more of a journey. And so the first place that I went to was a place that I'm familiar with, and that's only really recently in the last year, I would say, of my practice started to become a place that I'm visiting. And at the moment I just call her the crone in the woods, but essentially the first place that I find myself is a cottage on the edge of a dark woodland, and it's always nighttime when I visit there. And I go into the cottage and I sit down with the crone, who is this beautifully warm, welcoming grandmother type lady, and she usually welcomes me with a hug. And this time, after she hugged me, she gave me a black necklace which I knew to be onyx. I hope I'm saying that right, but I knew that by her giving me this necklace, that was essentially her providing me a protective talisman for the journey that I was about to undertake. The next thing that she gave me as well was a sickle and a bag of grain. So I didn't quite understand what she meant by this when she first offered it to me, but I took it with me and then realized later on that this was an offering to give to Belladonna. I'll get into that a little bit later when we get to that point in the journey, but to try and describe the cottage for you, I'll try and insert a picture if I can to give you an idea. It's just a very old traditional cottage. There's a fire going, there's always a table, there's lots of herbs and wooden tools around and things like that. And so she seems to be some sort of a gatekeeper for me when accessing particularly the more shadow side of the underworld. This tends to be the first place that I end up going to. And then from there I venture down a spiral staircase that then goes into the woodland, and then a spirit that I recognized met me on the edge of the woodland before I went into it actually, and it's a spirit who, it will make more sense later on in the story, but I recognized them from one of my local woods near here, but I didn't actually know who or what they were until later on in this journey. So that was one really exciting thing that actually happened. I was able to specifically identify this spirit so I can work with them more closely moving forward. But I met with that spirit, I gave them my coin as payment, and then that spirit, which the only way I can describe it is a tall looking man, but not a man, because they kind of look like this mixture between a plague doctor and a crow, because obviously the plague doctors have those crow sort of masks, but sort of big black feathers, sort of in a cloak gown sort of dress, and then the face is sort of a mixture between this sort of shape-shifting crow and human spirit energy. And so I follow them through this curtain as we've ventured through the woodland for a while, and then the first place that we went into actually was this really intoxicating room that was sort of dimly lit by a load of candles, so it had this very warm glow. And I just remember going into the room and it kind of felt like an opium den house. There was a lot of vapors, and the humans or the spirits that were in there, which I think were probably astral entities of some description or astral human prints in the room, of people that were either traveling or have traveled with Belladonna before. So even though I say it was this sort of opium type experience, I'm trying to use that as a descriptive term, because it was essentially this room where I was watching all of these figures sort of move past me in a way that they almost had trails that were left behind them. And I remember when I stepped into this space, I really had to focus on following this crow type being that was up ahead of me so that I didn't get pulled into it, because it was this very hypnotic kind of feeling that was in that room. So we ventured through there first. We got to the edge of that room, and then he lifted up a curtain, and then I found myself having to squeeze through this dark stone wall that was really no bigger than myself, and I had to really squeeze my way through, and I felt like I was on the outside of some sort of medieval keep, and I could hear the crashing of waves in the distance, and I could hear this big storm that was brewing, and there was loads of cobwebs as I was going through, but I just kept shuffling and shuffling. And then as I got to the edge of it, I realized that I was actually standing on the very edge of a keep, really high up in some sort of medieval castle that was by the edge of the sea. And so I knew that there was only one place to go, and that was to jump down into the ocean. So I did that, and then I had one of my other guides come and get me, and she is a siren type being. So anytime that I find myself venturing through water in the astral realm, she always comes and gets me and then takes me safely as a passage through to make sure I don't get into any trouble on my way. And then I got to the other edge, and then I realized that there was this vast tall tower that was standing before me, just a single column tower. And so I started making my way up the spiral staircase for that, and the crow, or should I say a crow, was flying around the tower as I was going up and cawing. So I knew I was going in the right direction. And then I finally got to the room where Belladonna was, and I just vividly remember that as I was climbing up the staircase, the rooftop of the tower was completely open, and there was just this bright shining light of a star that was just pooling down through the tower. And so as I ventured up into the room, the only way I can kind of describe it, I'll try and put photos if I can find any online throughout this whole video that can just sort of help you visualize the experience a little bit better. But if you've seen Lord of the Rings, I think it's the first one, but when Gandalf goes into Saruman's, I almost said Sauron then. What a shame. That would have been a shame if I had messed that up. Then I would not be a true Lord of the Rings fan. Saruman, when Gandalf goes to meet him and then realizes that actually he's a baddie and not a goodie, that room that he's kind of in, it's sort of like this grey blue tone kind of circular room. That was kind of the space, right? So just to help you visualize, I went into the room and it was completely pooled by so much starlight. I just remember that there was so much starlight that was just flooding into this space. And so I knew that starlight was going to be of some significance in working with Belladonna, which we'll come to that a little bit later as well. But the way that I can describe how she was just this very queen-like energy. And she was sat in this sort of blackish grey blue toned, just like metallic looking stone throne, very regal, very queen like, and I walked into the space and she was dressed almost like, I want to say, sort of Matisha Adams. She had that very romantic goth sort of a look and feel to her, which is obviously very fitting with the fact that she is one of the poisonous plants. And I just remember a crow that was sitting on her shoulder that was sort of engaging with her, and she was engaging with him. And I didn't realize at the time, but then later on when I actually sat down and spoke to her, I realized that and I know it seems probably as I'm relaying this story to you really obvious, but when you're actually traveling and astral journeying, you're not really thinking, you're just allowing the whole experience to happen to you. So it was only later that I actually put two and two together and realized that the spirit that met me on the edge of the woods, that is actually a being that I met in my local woodland the other year, was actually this crow that I saw in the tower, was the same crow that was then sat on her shoulder, obviously just shifted into its animal form. And then later I found out that it was actually the crow that was being the translator between me and Belladonna. So it was the crow that was translating our conversation back and forth and helping me to actually understand what she was saying, understand the symbology. And so that really just clarified the fact that the crow spirit is this exceptional totem and being to work with when you're wanting to communicate with the otherworld spirits. So the first thing that I did was I realized that the offerings of the grain that I had was for her, and so I gave them to her. And when I gave them to her, she said, "Oh, I can see that the old woman likes you." And so from that interaction, I knew that there's some connection between this crone woman in the woods and then the Belladonna plant spirit, which I still have yet to thread together, but that's something that I'm going to explore later on in my journeying as well. But when I offered her the grain, she put her hand in the bag and then she threw the grain across the marble floor of the room. And then as she did that, the grain turned into these almost like little pieces of starlight, and then they rose up into the air, and then they started to shift and shape and change into all these different patterns. And she started to test me. So I saw 3 things that took form. And each time the grains would shift and change, she would ask me, "What do you see now?" And I didn't know it at the time, but she was basically testing me, I guess, maybe to see if I could pass them so that she would work with me. That's kind of the feeling that I got, that she wasn't just going to give her wisdom freely, that only people that really worked for it were going to be privy to it. So I saw 3 things. I first saw a serpent, a big fanged serpent that took shape. And then I saw a ship that was out at sea that was in a bad storm. And then the last thing that I saw was a triple moon. And so I know that those 3 symbols likely have something to do with what Belladonna is good to work with for, either as a whole or specifically for me. As I said, this is just my first journey with her, so I need to explore these things further, and that is why we keep going into journeying with the spirits, so that we can evolve and learn from the wisdom that they gave us the last time that we met with them. So I need to explore that a little bit further. That was the first thing, was I gave her the offerings, and then I started having these tests. So after that test, she then took me over to a window, and well, actually, when I was first looking out the window, obviously I could see that stormy sea that I had traveled through to get to this tower. But what she did was, suddenly she did this, and it like pulled up a blind, and suddenly we were in the middle of space. Like, there was nothing outside except this vast galaxy of stars. And she said, "And so now what do you see?" And I said, "Well, I see, the cosmos, I see stars, I don't see the sea anymore," probably in much more eloquent terms. And she just smiled. And so I knew that she was happy with my answers. And so I'm pretty sure that by her pulling up the blindfold and the window, this was a very potent point that Belladonna can be very illusionary, and she can trick the mind. And obviously Belladonna was actually a plant that was incorporated into witches' flying ointments in the past in various potencies, so that obviously you could take it without actually dying. But she has that magic in the power of the illusionary and hallucinogenics, right? So on the reverse of that, I actually also feel that she can work with us to break free from illusion and to break through illusion. So as she gives illusion, she can also remove it if we have her as a plant spirit ally. The next thing that she did after these tests was she gave me this amulet, and she asked me again, what did I see? And I saw this sort of red, pinkish, purpley sort of toned precious stone that kind of had this rainbow look to it when it caught the starlight. And she gave that to me, and then she took my hand and she drew some sort of a symbol on my hand, and I didn't see what the symbol was, but this seems to be like a common thing that I get with spirits when I feel like I've connected to them, is that we exchange something, right? I've offered them something, and then if I pass any tests that they give me, or if they feel like they want to work with me, the way that they will express that is this mutual exchange. They give me something, I've given them something, and I always have a traveling satchel with me, and so this always has the tools that I'm journeying with, or any tools that I collect in my otherworld experiences, so that I can bring the wisdom back to this realm. So once she gave me the talisman and then made the sigil on my hand, I knew that, okay, right, now we can start exploring this relationship and asking questions, and I can start understanding what she can actually help me with in terms of my witchcraft practice. So the first thing that was very obvious to me was that Belladonna is an exceptional ally for helping us to get in touch with our seductive nature, with the nature of our inner beauty, able to translate that to an external experience. So we're talking on a very physical level there, as well as your sexuality. So Obviously, she is an excellent plant spirit to be working with in terms of Lilith, and this was mentioned later on as well, that, and I will get to that bit in a second, but that the two partner very exceptionally. So she can be an excellent ally if you're wanting to work with glamour magic, if you are wanting to reclaim your natural beauty and your natural seduction so that you can walk in the world more empowered or feeling more confident, or if you're in a situation where you feel like you need to exert some sort of an influence, hopefully not for the negative. I encourage you not to use it for the negative. But if you're wanting to exert some sort of influence, I don't know, say if you're giving a huge public speech at some sort of conference and you're really nervous, then working with Belladonna can give you that confidence to stand in your power with your back straight up, your posture held well, and be able to enchant a room and be able to hold them. And make sure that you put the pauses in the right places and that you're communicating in this really powerful, seductive kind of way. So not only in a sexual sort of manner, obviously the obvious understanding of seduction, but also this ability to entrance by the way that we communicate and being able to draw people into us and draw them in to what we're saying and what we're telling them. Next thing that she told me that she could help with was actually blood magic. Now, I have never done any blood magic, so this was something that was brand new to me and something that I've never even really looked at. Well, I've read into it in the past, but it's never been something that I've been like, oh, I want to try that. I have very low pain tolerance, so even the idea of pricking my finger seems like too much. But one thing that she did show me very clearly was she took my finger and she pricked it and she collected a little piece of my blood, and then she popped the blood into the roots of the Belladonna plant. Now, I need to explore this further because I'm sure that there's something with poisonous plants. Again, it's really not something that I've explored, so I might be completely wrong in saying this, but I know in some very, very old traditional witchcraft, the use of blood magic is very common, but it was sort of specified that by doing this, say if you own an actual Belladonna plant, by pricking your finger and exchanging a little bit of blood and mixing it into the water, you're going to create that really strong connection with the plant spirit of that particular plant. So if you have a Belladonna plant that you are nurturing and taking care of, and you would like this to be the spirit ally that you are working with rather than the Belladonna spirit overall, then this was suggested as a really strong way to start building up that psychic connection. So to mix it with the water and then feed the plant. She didn't specify that you needed to do this multiple times. It seemed like only once, but if that is something that interests you, if you do grow poisonous plants, then by all means go ahead and do that. I actually would really love to be able to own my own Belladonna plant after this experience, so hopefully one day in the future I will be able to, and I reckon that I might try that myself. But after she showed me that, I then sort of was taken out of the space where we were in. I was still in the space, but my mind was kind of shown that as she handed me the plant, I saw the plant then almost like, have you seen, if you play Skyrim, which I haven't done in years, but there's that like skills room, right? So gamers will get this, but basically it's like every time you gain a skill, it's sort of, there's like a star map and it kind of like, you get a new constellation or something. And so what I saw as she handed me an actual Belladonna plant was that the plant then went into this new space that I hadn't seen before, but I know to now be a extra part that has just newly emerged, I guess, in my astral journeys. But I think I'll refer to it as the night garden, but it was kind of like this opening in a moonlit garden that kind of had this circular stone area in the center, and then there were spaces around the edges with little stone pillars. And I saw that the Belladonna plant then was planted in one of these spaces, and then as it was planted there was kind of like this energy that sort of was around it and it started to grow. So I took that again as a confirmation that this was a plant spirit ally that I have now gained and that I will be able to work with for understanding and communication in my work in the future, and be able to exchange gifts and wisdom with them. Now again, there was this theme of all this starlight, and I had this amazing moment actually when, because it was kind of like this background thing, right? It's not that she specifically said to me, anything about starlight, but what she did say was that the perfect time to work with her was during the dark moon. So for those of you that don't know, the dark moon is essentially the new moon, so it is that very brief window of time where the moon is not visible in the sky, and so obviously this is the time when the stars are the brightest. And so she specifically said to me that the dark moon was the perfect time to work with her. And then I realized that when you actually look at a belladonna plant, she has that beautiful dark berry and then the leaves that look like a star on the outside, right? So I need to explore this further with her because it felt really prominent, this theme that there's something about working with belladonna and the stars or starlight or in the time of the dark moon that's really potent. This was the time of the dark moon when I did this journey as well, so it was the perfect time to connect in with her. But I feel like there's something really interesting to explore there. So if you have worked with belladonna and you've had any of these themes of starlight or something maybe about the constellations, I don't know, but anything like that, then please comment down below because it's something I'm really intrigued and excited to explore with her. The next thing that she specified was again Lilith. Obviously this was the goddess that I'm focusing on for the month of January if you watch my Hedge Witch school episode that I just uploaded, but she specified specifically that working with Lilith was something that was really important for me to do. And then what was fascinating was that she started mentioning the 7 deadly sins, and I'm going to do a completely different video on this because I think it's going to be a big theme to talk about, and there'll be a lot to say, and this is already a super long video, but there's something about working with belladonna and Lilith and reclaiming a certain amount of each of the 7 deadly sins, which is important for integrating the shadow and is actually the structure that this world is built upon. The people that see the greatest success in this world are the ones that have not had their power taken away by the church, and that is in the form of making the 7 deadly sins something that should not be pursued, when in actual reality if you pursue them in excess then obviously that is completely damaging, but you cannot be successful in this world if you don't take even a little tiny bit of that. But we will get into that in another video entirely. But this idea of Lilith being this demonized female archetype, again having this theme of power being removed, that and working with belladonna is going to be something really powerful. So I'm going to be potentially merging the two in a journey at some point soon, so I'll see how that goes, but I will update you on my workings with those two as an aspect together. But then the next thing that she was showing me was that belladonna is very much an alchemist. So I got took over to this other table that had all of those, you know, like science kind of jars that are in all those different shapes, and there's all different liquids and things are bubbling and things are moving from one pipe to the next. It was this beautiful alchemical kind of space, and she was showing me her mixing all of these different things. So she's very much an alchemist, I think, obviously not only in the way that she has an ability to work with other herbs, so for things like flying ointments. Obviously I am not recommending that anybody go and ingest belladonna. It is a poisonous plant, but there is very ancient old recipes of witchcraft journeying, and some people, and I need to find a supplier actually, some people have very skillfully learned how to extract poisonous baneful plants and put them into tinctures or ointments and things like that at safe levels, but please do not try it at home. But I have given a request to belladonna that I will be led to a reputable supplier and skillful alchemist so that I can get my own flying ointment, so I can actually potentially work with her in more of a physical level as well. But she was very much showing me that she is this alchemist and she has this ability to create great internal change in our own alchemical selves, right? So she has this ability to take aspects of us and put us through this transformative process so that we can be born anew. So they were the main events that happened in my first journey with belladonna. I am so incredibly excited to work with her because it was so vivid, it was so visceral, it was beautiful, it was so gorgeous, and I really hope that I've been able to find photos when I now go and search that might be able to show you some visuals, and that I've been able to scatter them throughout the video somewhere just to try and give you a little bit more of an idea for those that might be struggling to visualize it. Obviously I had to do the whole process in reverse and then return back to the cottage with the crone in the woods, but I'm not going to repeat all of that. And then there was a few more things that she showed me during my time with her, but they're things that I want to keep a little bit more personal and private. So I've just shared with you the main things that I think might help you in connecting with her as a plant spirit ally. One thing that I did do when I returned though was I did a quick tarot pull from the Murder of Crows tarot, which I'm sure all of us know it by now. But this one and the Queen Mab Oracle are the two decks that I'm specifically working with. I just did a little pull from this just to see if there was anything that I was missing or forgetting in terms of information, because it was such a long journey that it was hard to try and write it all down quick enough before I forgot it all of the tiny details. So I just checked in with the Murder of Crows and clarified, because obviously the crow spirit was present in that communication. And as I said, this and the Queen Mab are the decks that I'm specifically focusing on for the month of January in my Hedge Witch School series. So I pulled from this and then I pulled from the Queen Mab, and I'm not going to read what the descriptions were for the cards that I got, but I asked if there was any other messages that Belladonna wanted to relay to me before we finished. So I'm out of the journey by this point and I'm back in my room and I'm writing, and then I asked the cards after. And so the card that I got was Thou Art a Witch and the Sacred Radiance. So for anyone that has the Queen Mab, you can go and read those meanings if you want. But what I did realise is that the Queen Mab is going to be an exceptional oracle deck, not only for conversing with Lilith, but also for any baneful plant spirits, so any poisonous plant spirits as well as the Murder of Crows. So these are two excellent tools to have if you're wanting to work with baneful plant spirits. So thank you for listening, guys. I really hope you managed to stick with me for that. I feel like that was a long conversation, but there was so much that I wanted to share with you because I'm so excited to work with her. Anyway, I hope that you liked this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and go and check out the channel and see what other things we have on there for your exploration. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.